Hello, family members. Hope you're having a nice day today. I want to apologize in advance for any large booms that you hear or sudden dog barking because in my town, fireworks are completely banned, but we don't have city police, and the county sheriff is not coming out to enforce that. And so, every holiday for several days before and after, loud booms. I can't really get around that. I do apologize. But don't you just love this country? Seriously, that's the topic of this video today. I'm American. It is the 4th of July, America's birthday, big bash celebration, and not just any birthday. Her 250th birthday. Ooh, right? Whatever. I've been very torn today. I have my goddaughter from the summer. That's why I haven't been uploading very often. I apologize for that as well. But while she's here, I kind of have to change my mindset a little bit. And for me, I'm like, I want her to have a fun day. So I'm not discouraging her from enjoying the 4th of July as a holiday with her friends in the neighborhood. She's gone off to go see fireworks. And, I didn't want to rain on her parade, so to speak. Even though it did literally rain all day today and is, I think, actually still currently raining, but fireworks anyway, right? But it's just been thinking a lot about Frederick Douglass the last few days and his speech about the 4th of July, where he talks about what to the slave is the 4th of July. And there's a lot of groups right now that I think could say they kind of feel the same way. Obviously, immigrants or people of color who, for some reason, get, tagged as being immigrants, whether they're U.S. citizens or not, apparently, are definitely in a situation where they're like, what are we celebrating exactly? Trans people, definitely in a situation where I would say they're definitely feeling probably a little bit like, what are we celebrating, Disabled people, like myself, full disclosure, I guess. Yeah. What is there to celebrate when the Olmsted ruling, oh my gosh, I don't think that your average everyday American understands what we're on the precipice for disabled people right now. They want to reinstitutionalize disabled people. And it's been, 45 years or whatever since they shut down those horrible places. And I guess people have just forgotten or they never knew how horrible they were. We're talking about, genocide. We're talking about genocide against disabled people being contemplated, being set up by comments from the Supreme Court and doubts being placed on disabled people's rights to, exist in the community. And let me tell you, whatever arguments they tell you for why that's good to put disabled people in institutions, they're going to get such... No, they will not. They will not. Disabled people, when removed from their community, have so little protection. I could tell you stories that would absolutely disgust you, that would be absolutely inappropriate for YouTube, that I know about what happened in the institutions because my dad worked in them and he told me stories. And people like him that worked in those places are dying or dead And people are forgetting about how horrific they were. And we're on the precipice of falling right back into that because our president and his administration and the Republican Party is so openly and transparently eugenicist against disabled people, and they literally seem to get away with it with almost no comment. And I don't understand why able-bodied people are just like letting this go, I guess, as if they couldn't become disabled tomorrow, as if this couldn't happen to them, you know? How do you commemorate, how do you spend the day when you're in like existential fear for your existence at the behest of your own government? Your own federal government is out to get you, literally, if you're trans, if you're disabled, if you're, you know, a DACA dreamer. Well, I'll tell you what I did. I made my goddaughter quesadillas and the little neighbor girls across the street. Because what else are you going to do, right? I listened to NoFX's Wolves in Wolves Clothing, which is an album that soothed my heart after George W. Bush won re-election in 2004. That is the first time that my country broke my heart. I'm white. I came from a solidly middle-class household. I was very sheltered. I apologize. But that is literally true, the first time that my country truly broke my heart. You know, I understood there were problems before, but I just could not comprehend how people could re-elect that man after he had illegally taken us to war in Iraq. You know, I will give him a little bit credit. This was before Katrina. People didn't know that was going to happen. But they did know about the Patriot Act. And they did know about, like, mission accomplished. And they did know about a lot of things that he had done. And maybe even they were aware of the Brooks Brothers riot, where Roger Stone and a bunch of his buddies went in and literally stole the election for Bush from Gore. Maybe they didn't know that. I don't know if I knew that. Honestly, looking back, I don't think I knew that, because I think I would have been a lot more angry. But No Child Left Behind, I mean, there were so many things that George W. Bush had already done that were, like, unforgivably horrible. Defunding stem cell research in the United States. I don't know how many people with chronic conditions had critical research that could have saved their lives or, you know, improved their quality of life that we just lost and will never know about. I mean, there were a lot of things that man had done in 2004, and my heart was broken, and I checked out of politics for like a decade. I didn't vote for Obama because I couldn't care about politics at that point. My heart had been broken in 2004. And Wolves in Wolves Clothing by NoFX is part of what healed my heart. And I listened to that album, which is from 2006. It's 20 years old. And there are so many songs that are more relevant now. There's a whole thing about where he's talking about mandates, and I'm like, was Fat Mike like psychic? Because some of this sounds like he's talking about COVID and Trump, and he's not. He's literally talking about George W. Bush in 2006. Now, that was post-Katrina. But a lot of the things that we know about him now, we didn't necessarily know about them then. And that was, wow. It just made me realize there were so many people saw this coming. People, if you listen to System of a Down, I've been listening to a lot of them today, they saw a lot of this coming. All of the hints of where we are today were there in Bush's presidency. And there was a little bit more of a sheen of normality, of regularity. The Republicans and their leaders actually put up a little bit of an attempt to obfuscate what they're doing. We're past that. We are past that. But the difference is that it's more open. And I do think maybe a little bit less competent. But the same things were happening. The same goals were set in place. George W. Bush also ruined the American education system and undermined it and made it worse and made it more likely to be dissolved into vouchers and private blah, 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 which is so not effective. I don't know why we want to try to inject a profit motive into education. That's never going to be a good idea. Never. You might get a few outliers on the corner, but on a broad scale, on a countrywide scale, especially with a country with this many people, no, it's not going to work. And now, we got Linda McMahon trying to just destroy it outright, completely get rid of it. They have taken responsibility for running the education of disabled children and tried to take it out of the Department of Education and put it into DHS. Because separate but equal, I guess. That's legal now. If you were paying attention, if you were alive and paying attention in the 2000s, you could see where we were going. If you were alive and paying attention in the 80s, you could see where we're going. But we haven't been able to stop the car from crashing. Climate change is so bad that we have this extreme heat right now, this extreme heat dome that's literally putting people in the hospital just for trying to go and celebrate the 4th of July in Washington, D.C., as people have done for now centuries. I mean, okay, the 4th of July wasn't really made a holiday until maybe 100 years after 1776. So, okay, like a century and a half, whatever, But it's so in our face. The way to oppose it is just not to talk about it, I guess. And all ahead they're building a new coal plant. A new coal plant. This is ridiculous. Everything has been so depressing. I just can't even make videos. Even before my goddaughter got here, I had about a week where I was just so depressed. I couldn't even start talking about any topic because it was so depressing, because there was no hope in sight. And then Zoran Mondani made his DSA endorsements. Well, not necessarily DSA endorsements, because I don't think Brad Lander is DSA. I think he's aligned but not part of it. I don't know. Maybe there is hope. The thing is, we have to fight. We have to get involved. We have to do something. Maybe joining the DSA and phone banking for them is something that actually makes a big enough difference that we could actually overthrow the donor class in the Democratic Party. Like, I have been a Democratic voter my entire voting life. I turned 18 in the year 2000, registered Democrat, and voted for Al Gore in the 2000 election. I am the Democratic voter base. I'm a white woman, educated, blah, blah, blah. I'm all the things that the Democratic Party is supposed to be, right? And I was feeling so disillusioned with how the donor class had overtaken the leadership and gotten the leadership of the party so enthralled that they were absolutely unwilling and unable to even hear their base, let alone respond to them. Like, after Brad Lander beat Dan Goldman going out like, I don't know how I lost. Yes, that's the problem. You're not listening to your base. If you're listening to your base, then it shouldn't be possible. If you actually know what your base wants, what their priorities are, and whether or not they think that you are actually representing them, then you're not going to get voted out of your seat without knowing why. Admitting that you didn't know why you didn't win Dan Goldman is an admission that you weren't doing your job well. And I am kind of surprised to have to say that, because there were times when I liked that guy. You know, he was integral in the Trump impeachment, and all the pundits want to bring that up, like that overrides whether or not he's meeting the moment now, because that was a long time ago politically these days. But you know, he's makes a lot of sense. He's good on TV, you know, wasn't the worst person in Congress as far as I know, but he wasn't listening to his base, and so he got voted out. That's what happens. If people have someone to vote for, they're just so much more likely to come out. They're not that likely to come out when it's just voting against something. That's not that motivating. Not for the numbers that you need, really. The Democratic Party leadership has done everything it can for pushing 2 years now to ignore the fact that the difference between Joe Biden's win and Harris's loss is just people staying home. If they had enticed the same amount of people to come out to vote for Harris as voted for Biden, that would have been fine. It wasn't that more people necessarily voted for Trump. It wasn't like a either or. There were three choices: Trump, Biden, stay home. And people moved from Democrat, Biden, to Harris. They moved from Democrat to stay home. It wasn't they moved from Democrat to Trump. And the problem is the donor class and the Democratic leadership want to court people who they think are like, we're Trump voters but are winnable for conservative Democratic candidates. So that's who they want to run. Conservative Democratic opponents who they think can win some of Trump's voters. That's not who they should be worrying about. That's not who they should be serving. That's not who they should be trying to appeal to. They should be trying to appeal to me, to a Democratic voter who will stay home if they're unhappy with how things go. To people who are independent or first-time voters who've always stayed home. They need to move people from stay home to Democrat. They don't need to worry about moving people from Republican to Democrat. And the DSA actually seems to understand this. And the candidates that Zoran endorsed seem to understand that. Zoran Mondani seems to understand that. All over the country, we're seeing more progressive Democrats who to me are just people who listen to their base. The base is very clear what it wants. And the fact that the Democratic leadership doesn't know means that they don't want to know. And so to me, the way that you celebrate a holiday like this, is you remind yourself of your own power, your community power. You remind yourself that it's about creating community and then expanding it. This is something that I heard recently one of the DSA candidates say, or maybe it was a DSA operative say about the recent primaries, is if you go out and you have any sort of group of people, book club, knitting circle, community softball league or whatever, and you invite people to come together and do a protest or do a fundraiser or to bring supplies to a protest. They don't even have to necessarily be in the protest. That brings that group closer together. You bring that group closer together, and then you expand what community means to that group. You bring more people into that community by offering service, by being present. You don't even have to necessarily do a lot. You can just say, are you willing to bring water down to these people who are outside this building protesting something, something, something? They don't have to do anything other than drop supplies off, but then they're more engaged. They're more likely to learn. They're more likely to vote. They're more likely to help out their neighbors. Individualism is a false idol to this nation. This rugged individualism. It never is true. Even when people think of like homesteaders out on the prairie or whatever, making their own way, it's not an individual. It's a family. It's a mom and dad and maybe aunt and uncle, grandparents, bunch of children. It's still a community. There's no part of American history, no matter how idealized, where true greatness was achieved by individualism. It's all community coming together and doing wonderful things. We didn't get to the moon on Earth by one person doing it alone. And we didn't do anything that you might say is good or great on our own. It's all something where a collective comes together with a goal, with a dream, and they work and they support each other. And I think we can achieve that. I think people want that. And I'm angry. I think there's times to be angry, times for despair. But there's also time for action. And this is definitely a time where every little action pays dividends. Even just taking the time to read a good, political theory book, or buy a book of somebody who is you'd like to support, or just taking the time to educate yourself or learn something and then educate someone else. Any little thing you can do is defying the oppressors. I'm so sorry. I have to apologize for that. Family members, you can't let yourself feel overwhelmed. Whether you're here in America or abroad, I know that your community needs you, and that this is a very critical time in the world's history. And even small acts of community solidarity add up. Be angry, be sad, be brokenhearted, but also be supportive. Reach out. You know, my neighbor across the street there, uh, she's she's a right winger. She's Ugandan. She's black, like really black, like black African black. And her children are, mixed race, little girls. And they've been raised by a woman who, is raising them as a conservative Christian. And they come over into my household and they see things that are way different than they would ever see in their household. And I'm not trying to be in disrespect. I wouldn't want to like show them things that would make their mom uncomfortable or anything like that. But they just, because we opened our hearts to each other. Her husband helped us out before he passed. He died during COVID, and we helped her out when she was a new widow. Those little girls are like nieces to me. I don't have blood family that are Trumpers, but she's as close as I have. And we don't ever talk about politics, ever, which is good. But keeping her as part of my community, I think, is very important. And everyone who is like my literal neighbors and anyone who is my broader neighbors, every little thing matters. What are those little girls going to learn here in my household that may make a big difference in their life later? I don't know. Maybe nothing. But I'm giving them a chance to see something different. I'm giving them a chance to understand people who are different as people and not just caricatures, I have queer stuff around the house, like I don't hide it, but little things add up. So give yourself credit where you're doing little things. And when you see opportunities to do little things, take them. And listen to Wolves in Wolves Clothing, because I think it's like really spooky, honestly, how much of it really speaks to our time right now. It's honestly stunning. And I think it's also something that reminds us that the moment that we're in is unique, but it isn't something that we've never struggled through. And that there have been times that we've been able to fight back and win, and we can learn from those times, and we can learn from the times that we didn't win. And hopefully do better going forward. All right, family members, I think that's all I got for you today. I hope you have a nice day. Now she barks. Kimmy, really? Was that necessary, Kimmy? Necessary? Was it? She says, Happy 4th of July, I guess. Bye, family members. Take care of yourself. Bye.